We're on? All right, welcome everybody. Tonight is Tuesday, November 12th, 2019. It's not a Monday, but it is our regularly scheduled town council meeting. All members except for Mr. Reed are present. He had a work obligation, kind of an emergency at work, so he couldn't make it this evening. First and foremost, I want to congratulate all members of council on their re-election. So I don't know that I've been sitting on council where we've had all members re-elected, so it's kind of a new thing, right now.
I don't think so.
Even you, maybe, I don't know.
It's a valid point.
Even she got reelected.
So,
Even me.
yeah,
Even me.
I didn't mean you get reelected, I meant even during all of your years of service. So, congratulations to everybody. Before we begin, as all of you probably have heard by now, our former town attorney, Jeremy Hayden, passed away last week, and in that regard, I'd like to ask that you all please join me in a moment of silence. Thank you. We're going to move on to our consent calendar. Are there any comments with respect to the consent calendar? Objections? Seeing none, I'll pass the consent calendar as printed. Communications A through I, is that correct? Correct. Thank you. I'm used to having a double-sided agenda, just making sure. I ask that those be incorporated into the minutes, please, Madam Clerk. Public participation is next. Are there any members of the public that wish to participate at this time? All right, seeing none, I'll close the first public participation section. We have no appointments this evening. Action items, we'll go through them. A is the Town Council Committee on Finance, Education, Health, and Public Safety. Mr. Rooney?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We have not met, and I do not have any liaison reports for you either.
Thank you. Moving on to item B is Planning and Zoning, Public Works, and Parks and Recreation. Mr. Pellis?
I can drive today for the first time, so watch me. But I read the minutes. There was nothing really pertinent to the town council.
C is L&A. We did meet this evening. We did discuss some of the matters that are on our agenda this evening, which are items C, D, E, and I believe that's all. They all passed unanimously for consideration by council, so we will get to those in due course. We also circulated a final marked up, like a Christmas tree version of our rules of procedure, so we will have a lot of changes to the rules of procedure. We still have to discuss it one more time, so that should be on our next agenda. Mr. Reed wasn't present this evening, so we wanted to get his input as well, but we have circulated that for review, and I'll leave it to Mr. Reed to set our next meeting for L&A. Moving on to strategic planning, Mr. Formicello.
Yes, we were going to have a date this evening for our meeting. However, we need to coordinate a potential date with the fire department, so we need to get information from them on a date that works for them.
Okay. Thank you very much. E is EMS Building Committee. Mr. Rooney.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We did meet prior to council and council chambers. We paid some bills for Jakunski and Humes. We are now in a holding pattern waiting for, we passed inland wetlands. So it did go through inland wetlands, so now we're awaiting the completion of the plans from Burlington. And at that point, we'll make our decisions there. I know we did approve, Mr. Selectman, we did approve the movement to P&Z, so just to confirm.
Correct, yes, just in the spirit of getting the regulatory approval so that when we go for a final, process through council and board of finance and a town meeting to ask for final project approval, that we know we have a plan that's met those requisite steps.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's all I have for now, thank you.
Sure. Ms. Martin.
Mr. Rooney, did inland wetlands have any recommendations or any
restrictions or anything?
No, so the landscape engineer was there to answer any of those questions. We did have a couple of citizens show up that had some concerns, but we're significantly far away from the wetlands, give or take 30 to 40 feet away from any creek, river, or vernal pool or anything that could be even remotely affected. The project, it doesn't have anything to do with wetlands at all. But we, as always, you have people that live in the surrounding area that have concerns and want to know, so they came out and they posed their questions, which the landscape designer answered, very well.
Okay,
If that answers your question.
yes, it does.
So
Thank you.
That also answered my questions.
Great.
We all set?
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Rooney, appreciate that.
Yep, you're welcome.
F is the first selectman's update, Mr. Keller.
Thank you, Chairman. So a few items I have on tonight's report. One is just to go a little bit further in regards to the unfortunate passing of Jeremy Hayden. The services will be held this Saturday, the 16th, at Spadaccino's funeral home here in Monroe. I want to make sure everyone is aware of that. In the interim period for routine matters, I will be utilizing special counsel until I've named a successor. The second item is in regards to our upcoming inauguration. As everyone knows, the town charter specifies the fourth Monday in November. So we will have our inauguration ceremony on November 25th. My office is coordinating that with both of the two political parties' town committees. It will be at 7 p.m. here in council chambers. The third update is just in regards to Restaurant Week. I know there was a request for some specifics in regards to the costs. It's outlined there for you. As you can see, they're extremely similar to what they were last year. So we are well within budget in that regard. I wanted to update everyone on the project for property reval, which we've discussed before in the past. You know that's well underway. Our assessor, Justin Feldman, has advised me that we are nearing completion of that property reval as required by law. As everyone knows, this is every 5-year process, so the property values will be adjusted to the 2019 values versus their current 2014. We do expect an overall slight increase in property values, but those new assessments will not be utilized until a new mill rate is adopted relative to the new budget that would be in effect for the future fiscal year 2021. We will have a process whereby anyone who has any questions on the new assessment can go before an informal hearing with Vision Government Solutions before the reval is finalized, and all that information will be sent out in notices as well as on our town website. And last but not least, just to let the council know that I am rolling out, we are in the process of implementing a rollout of some new graphic standards for the town hall offices. We have a situation where if you were to get a business card or a piece of correspondence from different departments in town hall, every letterhead, every business card would look a little bit different. I don't think that's an appropriate, consistent look for the town, particularly when we're dealing with individuals, businesses, et cetera, that are coming in for service and want some consistency in our image as a town. So we are going to be rolling out with, we have a revised graphic that was created with a local graphic designer of a clean representation of our town seal, along with some standard business cards, letterheads, et cetera. So that'll be a process that will roll out over time.
Thank you, Mr. Kellogg. Okay, so we're gonna move on. We have no this evening. We have 6 matters of new business to take care of. First is the discussion regarding the process of naming the new Wolf Park playground. As you'll see in your packet, there is a memo, correspondence, and a request from Mr. Dan Keene, who is present. He's the chairman of the Monroe Playground Foundation, so we typically turn over the floor to you, Mr. Kellogg, if you have any comments. Otherwise, we can turn it over to Mr. Keene.
I think we can, one brief comment. I just wanted to thank Dan and his committee for their ongoing efforts. Dan had approached me in regards to this process, and my concerns were to ensure that, given this will be a fairly large donation that this body will be accepting from the Playground Foundation upon its completion, I think it's appropriate that not just the Parks and Rec Commission, who have already kind of voted on and agreed on this process, but I think this council should do so as well. With that,
Mr. Keen?
Alex, thank you for taking the time tonight. I thought I got more time when I got here, so I got here when I did. So I get for trying to time the agenda. So basically here, we've tried to just operate completely transparently through this whole process. One of the things we're trying to do, like Ken mentioned, is come up with a new name for the playground. Some people like the Kids Creation name, but it is a new playground, so the idea is to come up with a process that will let us name the playground, hopefully build some buzz in town around that, and get people, more interested in the project and recruit volunteers. We want to make sure that nobody ends up with a name that nobody likes, right? That's part of this whole thing. And so the idea is to solicit ideas from the community between now and like Thanksgiving timeframe. These are rough timeframes on the sheet. Do you guys have this? In your
Yes.
packet?
Yes, we
Okay.
do.
Okay. So the idea is now through Thanksgiving-ish, we collect ideas from the community. Those will be distilled down. The committee's gonna go through and review ones that we don't like. And then we'll review that with Parks and Rec, we'll review that with Town Council, review that with Ken's office, so that we all end up with a list of names that we're all comfortable with. And then that name gets put out to social media, those names get put out to social media for a vote. They just end up with like 5 to 7 names that people can pick from, and we're just trying to build a buzz around this playground. So that's at a high level what we're trying to accomplish here.
Very good, thank you very much. Any questions? Mr. Mao?
More just one idea, and quickly been looking at it. Well, I love everything on here, or the prize, the bragging rights. I also think something that might work with the town is having the person be part of the ribbon cutting for the playground itself, and having them with the selectmen to cut the ribbon. I think would be like a nice little recognition of them naming the playground.
It's a cool idea, I like that.
good idea.
Anybody else? I want to thank Mr. Keen for just keeping us apprised, as you and your committee have done. The one thing I'll just advise you of, and just ask that you take full advantage of, is that just interfacing with Ms. LaPellis and her subcommittee, which will give you kind of an informal town council view on things. So if you need any feedback from that subcommittee, we'll consider this project has been assigned permanently to that subcommittee until such time as they think that you need to come before the full council. I think it'll be easier for you along the ways, and they can certainly bring messages up to the full council to avoid you having to be away from your family and things of that nature for minor details. So I think it's a good way to keep us informed, and it gives you an informal way to communicate regarding any decisions you have with that subcommittee. So just throwing it out there, we sometimes formally assign things, but I think this is appropriate to kind of
Yes,
say, just
perfect.
stay down in that subcommittee for as long as you need them, and anything you need from us, they can certainly
I
bring up to
worked on the
council.
last one, and my MRA started doing all the staining. And we did it for Ron, 25 kids coming out in the afternoon, all they wanted was pizza.
I built Kids Creation too.
See, oh, good.
Maybe it was you that forced me to go there, I don't know. I did so voluntarily.
I drew a
I said we
tile.
should both chip in and call Dean and Frank's playground.
So thanks a lot, and I just wanted to offer that to you, so I appreciate it. All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Dan.
Thanks, Dan.
Moving on to new business, item B is the project concept review, which is the proposal from State Park 70 Task Force for the Blue Trees of Stepney project. I know Mr. Leneker requested this to be on the agenda this evening, and it's my understanding that he was unable to make it this evening. So I think the preference would be to have him present this, unless I'm mistaken. Mr. Cowell, do you have anything else to add?
Yeah, I think that was Mr. Leneker's request. I certainly think it would be appropriate to, certainly want to wait until he's available, because I'm sure if there's any questions people have, he's probably certainly much better able to answer them than I am, since it is his proposal. I would ask that people could keep their hard copy packets, and especially the color I don't normally print things in color, but I figured, how can you evaluate this one without it being in color, right?
And we could save one blue tree.
Yes, so if you could keep them for the next meeting, I mean, if there's any immediate issues that you would like me to communicate to Mr. Lenaker so he's prepared at the next meeting, I'm certainly happy to relay that, but I don't know if that's even something the council's had an opportunity to think through, given they're expecting a presentation now.
I thank you for that. If anybody has any questions, I would suggest you forward them to Mr. Kellogg. I'm trying to think of the appropriate subcommittee that I could also assign this to for questions in the interim. Mr. Pauls, do you want to take this one on as well?
I don't
just in
mind.
case there's
Sure.
any? Okay, so we'll assign this to your subcommittee just in case there's any work to be done in advance, and
So
that
you'll
just,
tell Mr. Lenaker whatever.
yeah.
Fine.
So we will do that, and if there's anything to be had or done in the subcommittee, then at least it gives them a forum, but otherwise we'll keep it on the agenda for next time.
Gotcha.
All right?
Postpone to the next meeting?
Yes.
That's what I thought you said.
C, resolution regarding the town of Monroe and the town of Newtown Police Department's private duty assistance compact. Mr. Pauls, is there a motion?
Yep, I will introduce the following resolution. Resolution regarding the Town of Monroe and Town of Newtown Police Department's Private Duty Assistance Compact and move for its adoption. Resolved, that Kenneth M. Kellogg, First Selectman of the Town of Monroe, is authorized to execute and deliver on behalf of the Town of Monroe the Private Duty Assistance Compact and any associated documents by and between the Town of Monroe Police Department and the Newtown Police Department for the private duty traffic control assistance.
Thank you, Mr. Pellis. Is there a second? Second by Mr. Rooney. For discussion, as we always do, I'll turn the floor over to Mr. Kellogg.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So as you have in your packets here, referral from the chief to enter into this essentially a mutual aid agreement between the town of Newtown and Monroe, but strictly related to private duty assignments such as traffic control on construction jobs, et cetera. I'll let the chief explain it in more detail. This has been reviewed by special counsel, and as you said, I know we went before LNA as well.
Thank you, Mr. Kellogg. As I said before, this was reviewed in LNA, it passed unanimously, and Chief Salvatore was also present to just corroborate what the first selectman said and indicate that he was and his department were in favor of this as something beneficial to the town. Chief, do you want to say anything other than that?
That's really it in a nutshell.
Okay.
Newtown requested because of the amount of jobs they have, and they're going unfilled on a daily basis. They're already in agreement with a number of other municipalities in the area, same services.
Great, thank you. Any questions? Discussion? All right, seeing none, I'll call for a vote. All those in favor? And against, that motion carries 8-0. We're going to move on to item D, which is the resolution regarding the First Amendment to the Administrative Services Agreement with ICMA Retirement Corporation. Mr. Faust, is there a motion?
Yep, I will introduce the following resolution. Resolution regarding the ICMA Retirement Corporation First Amendment to the Administrative Services Agreement and move for its adoption. Resolved, that Kenneth M. Kellogg, First Selectman of the Town of Monroe, is authorized to execute and deliver on behalf of the Town of Monroe the First Amendment to the Administrative Services Agreement and any associated documents by and between ICMA Retirement Corporation regarding administrative services as defined contribution benefit plans.
Motion by way of resolution by Ms. LaPellis. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Mauer. Again, for a discussion, Mr. Kellogg.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So this is an amendment to an agreement that was executed. This goes all the way back to October of 2017 under First Selectman Vavra. There were a couple of things that were brought to my attention by our Director of Finance, Ron Bonatsky. One was that that agreement contained a scrivener's error relative to a couple of the numbers in Section 6 relative to fees. It also did not comport with current practice related to the administrative, an aspect of the agreement related to administrative allowance account. So the purpose of this amendment is really just to comport with what was agreed upon in the past originally and current practice. This was reviewed prior to his passing by Jeremy Hayden. However, I had held this because it had not yet gone to the pension committee for their input has since gone there, and they did agree to move this forward as well.
Thank you, Mr. Kellogg. Again, for the record, LNA discussed this matter, it passed unanimously for council's consideration this evening, and Mr. Bonofsky was also present to answer any questions that came up. Any further discussion, Ms. Martin?
I just have a question. In LNA earlier this evening, Mr. Kellogg, you said that the fees were, as you looked through it, the fees were not what we had agreed to.
Correct.
Does it, were we paying too much?
We
More
weren't-
than what we agreed to?
so
We're not paying
It is,
enough?
no, my understanding is we were paying exactly what we agreed to, but the actual contract as written had a different number in the contract. So we were paying what we were supposed to be paying, but there was a Scrivener's error, so it's an inaccurate. The current agreement that's in place has an inaccurate number on it.
Okay,
Can
all
I
right.
ask
But
what a
all parties involved have agreed that what's in the amendment was what was agreed upon.
I see, thank you.
Can I ask what a Scrivener's error is?
Typo.
A
So-
typo? Okay. When I read it, I thought, gee,
They don't
okay.
have those in chemistry because
Is
it
that
causes a big
scribe?
problem.
No, they have
Can I
like
just
symbols.
ask what the specific one is, so when I do my minutes, I'll be able to.
It was relative to the rates.
Okay.
Anybody else? All right, seeing no further discussion, I will call this for a vote. All those in favor? And against, motion carries 8-0. Item E is our resolution regarding the administrative assistant to the senior center job description. Mr. Pellis, is there
I
a
will
motion?
introduce the following resolution. Resolution regarding the job description for the administrative assistant to the senior center and move for its adoption. Resolved, that the town council hereby approves the revised job description for the administrative assistant to the senior center in the Community and Social Services Department.
Motion by way of resolution by Mr. Pellis. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Formichella. Again, for discussion, Mr. Kellogg.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, as my memo outlines, we've had a retirement in the senior center. So as we're in the process of filling that position, we've taken out, our Director of Community and Social Services, along with our HR Director, have taken the opportunity to take a look at that job description and really just wanted to clean up some housekeeping issues relative to format and structure, and also just update a few minor things to just kind of be more current. There were some things removed that just aren't relevant anymore, such as there's specific reference to the Monroe Courier, things like that, as you can see in the red line version. There's a clean version in the back of your packet as well.
Thank you, Mr. Kellogg. Again, LNA did review this job description, passed it unanimously for consideration by council, and I want to thank both Ms. Lombardi and Ms. Ali for attending and being available to answer any questions that we have. Any further discussion? Mr. Mauer.
I just want to make sure I'm understanding correctly. So we did change the minimum of education requirements from an associate's degree to a preferred associate's degree, but a minimum of high school.
Correct.
Are we at all concerned, was there any concern mentioned from the meetings with the our Community and Social Services Director about the changing qualifications or anything like that, or how that might affect the position?
No, not at all.
Did not come up in LNA. Any further discussion? All right, seeing none, I'll call for a vote. All those in favor? And against, motion carries 8-0. Our final item of new business this evening is the resolution regarding a donation to the Parks and Recreation Department for a memorial bench from Robert Laval.
I'd make a motion to accept Park and Recreation $1,735 memorial bench donation from Robert Lavalley, I thought.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Pellis, second by Mr. Mauer. Again, these items are on our agenda to show our appreciation and thanks to those who made such generous donations. If there's any other discussion, please let me know. If not, I'll call for a vote. All those in favor? Motion carries 8-0. Second public participation. Would any members of the public wish to participate in our second public participation? All right, seeing none, I'll close the second public participation. Before we adjourn, just want to remind council of two things. At our next meeting on the 25th, we will have our committee reappointments, so new appointments for committees, and our leadership vote. so be prepared for that. And with that, is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Motion by Mr. Powell, second by Mr. Formicello. All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries 8-0. Good night, everybody.
You look to the wrong side.